So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this session 5. Thank you for joining us a day later than expected. We're really sorry about the issues that were going on with Zoom that meant that we couldn't run this yesterday. Additionally, in some ways, we are lucky because not only do we have Chopsaw joining us, who will introduce themselves in a moment, we've also got a bit more of Tem than we were expecting because Tem had some childcare stuff. So we are very excited for today. So yeah, I am Cluster Schmuck, or Dahlia, and I'm the head ref of LRD. Tem, do you want to say who you are?
Sure. I'm Tem, or Theminist Killjoy, and I'm a referee based in Glasgow.
Chopsaw.
I'm Chopsaw. I guess you could call me Becca if you wanted. And I am a referee usually based in New York City, but currently hiding in Massachusetts.
Awesome. So that's the three of us. We've also got Owen, or Short Circuit, who is moderating for us as always today. Unfortunately, Holtz can't be with us due to work. As we always like to start off, just to say that as always in this group, when we asked people who wanted to join us, just to remind ourselves that actually a third of people here are already officials, a third don't know anything about rugby whatsoever and would like to be an official, and a third are skaters or players who don't have an interest at the moment of being an official, but realise that understanding the rules may be helpful. And that actually there are, I think, over 30 different countries being represented. Tem and I are often speaking from quite a European perspective. Chopsaw will be speaking from a North American perspective, but actually she's officiated all over the world, similar in ways to Tem and I. So yeah, hopefully that places us a little bit. Tem.
Yeah, so I quickly would just like to issue an errata from a previous week. In the week when we did some pack definition distances exercises, there was a question where one of the results suggested that the length of a velociraptor from nose to tail was 15 to 20 feet. That is an incorrect statistic. Velociraptors are very small. Utahraptors, which is what we culturally associate with the concept of velociraptors thanks to franchises such as Jurassic Park, are actually much larger. So do not define pack definition based on velociraptors. They are the size of turkeys.
I have to say that might be one of my favorite sentences you've ever said to me. But thank you for that clarification. And actually,
you're very welcome.
Part of that, and actually being able to understand when we've made a mistake, is stuff that we will be talking about in the coming weeks. So that was an important clarification that I much appreciated. So just to kind of go over what we've talked a little bit about over the last few weeks, we've spoken about lots of different penalties, such as forearm, low block, lead block, high block, head block, back block. We've spoken about the engagement zone, which obviously within that has the pack and what that means. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking more and more about particular positions, some of the stuff that is less written in some ways and is more kind of known through doing. This week, we're going to be talking a bit about OPRing and also 2 more penalties. What we thought we would try, and you can let us know how successful this is the activity that Holtz made. We thought actually worked really well, both as something to reflect on, but also as something that helps us when getting into the mindset when talking about OPRing. So my hope is that you'll all be able to see this screen. The way this works is you'll see some, we can actually read the instructions, is it's trying to help you think about where the pack is and also count points and do lots of different things. So it's trying to help you just think about things in a really kind of high level sense whilst retaining information. So an arrow will appear on the screen and the pack starts off kind of in front of you. And if the arrow faces left, it means it's front. If it then faces back, it means it's middle. If it faces back again, it means it's back. And it also has points that come up, as in stars. So what we're going to try and do is see if by the end we know where the pack is and how many points were in the last round. I'm hoping this makes sense. And if not, it's just something that we can do. It can fail miserably here. And if you want to, you can do it when you're back at home. Tam, you're muted. I can't tell if you're trying to speak.
Sorry, can we start again?
Yeah, okay.
No, I just wanted to say, so there's an arrow that's like pointing back on itself, and that symbolizes like the end of a scoring trip. So you should stop counting points and begin again from 0 whenever you see the purple arrow that is like pointing backwards.
Good point about point scoring. So that's 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. Pack is back and the point scoring start again. I'm now going to stop talking. For anyone just joining us, this will be over in about 30 seconds. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, so if you were following along with that, you should have got that the pack was in the middle by the end and that there were no points scored on that last round. The thing that I would say that's interesting about this is it's very, very, very rare for there to be so many jams or so many rounds where there aren't just 4 points given. So that is more just to be part of this exercise. But yeah, we thought this might be something that you might enjoy thinking about, but also trying to have a bit of an understanding about thinking about everything. And on that note, Tem, over to you.
Hello. Yes, so I am going to talk to you a little bit about an OPR and what they do and who they are. So OPR first stands for Outside Pack Referee. So these are usually there are 3 officials who are situated on the outside of the track boundary and who are the eyes from the outside. So their main responsibility really is just to support the infield, support the jam referees, support the inside pack referees, and to keep an eye on the pack. So a lot of the time the inside pack referees have their attention consumed with other things such as distance tracking, like we discussed, and pack definition. So the outside pack referees are often the officials who are most likely to catch blocker on blocker contact in the pack and other contact penalties, as well as anything that really hinges upon the outside track boundary, because they're the ones with the best view. It's tough to capture exactly what it means to be an OPR. In my opinion, it's simultaneously the most challenging referee position to perform excellently, but at the same time, I think it's the only referee position where you could do nothing at all and it wouldn't just break the game. In any other referee position, there are responsibilities that without doing them, the structure of the game is not held appropriately. Without OPRs, you lose a lot of accuracy and you probably would have very frustrated players, but it is possible to officiate roller derby without OPRs. But like I said, in my opinion, it is the most difficult position to do really, really well. So a lot of the time it can be quite frustrating for newer officials because as it can be a place where it doesn't matter so much if you're struggling or you're less experienced, it is very, very tough. Let's go on to talk a little bit about OPR positioning. Positioning is a thing that people always get feedback on as an OPR. It's the most common feature of OPRing. If you ever OPR at a tournament and you go to a tournament head referee or crew head referee for feedback, it's always, the OPR positioning was great, the OPR positioning was bad, everyone was out of position, you need to get in position. And this concept doesn't really mean anything without it being explained. So hopefully we can shed some light on that. The fact is, it's complicated. And while the majority of feedback for OPRs says you're in the wrong position, we can't tell you what the right position is in any quantifiable terms. There isn't a right physical location or a right specific distance from the pack in any one of the 3 OPR positions. There is just a most optimal perspective given what is happening on the track at that time. Okay, let's go on. So what do I mean when I say optimal OPR positioning? The right positioning at any given moment can only be judged in direct relationship to the action that is happening on the track at that time. So this is the point that I was just making, that to be in the right place, that can only be measured based on what's happening. If the pack is very tight and very close, you want to be much closer to the pack. If the pack is very loose and you need to get some distance to see actions happening at speed that take up a lot of space, you need to be responsive to what's happening. Good positioning is fundamentally about reading the game and responding dynamically and swiftly. So your position is good not based on where you are, but based on how you move and how you react. You are constantly judging where your attention is most needed and adjusting yourself so that that attention can maximally interpret the action. You need to be keeping track of what different things are happening on the track and where the attention of your fellow officials is directed. So that means when you're looking at what's happening on the track and you're trying to decide whether you're in the right position or whether you need to adjust yourself, you need to also be able to look up, see where the jam referees are looking, see where the inside pack referees are looking, look where your fellow OPRs are. Do I need to move up? Do I need to move back? How do I need to adjust myself based on where everybody else is and what they have their attention on? So this picture here will show you the 3 OPR positions. We have a front OPR, a middle OPR, and a rear or back OPR. And all the officials here are in a pretty good position to view the action. But I say pretty good because it's impossible for me to know from this photo exactly what's happening and whether there's a more optimal way for these officials to be positioned at that time. I personally think they're doing a great job. Let's go on. So in order to assess your positioning and to critique it for yourself and to try and hold on to how to make it better, you need to ask yourself some questions. So you can be asking yourself, what illegal actions are happening? So this is about the game as a whole and the jam, like what kind of thing is happening a lot? Now, often you can get this in feedback from skaters, or you can get this in the huddles that you have as officials, or just from your own knowledge. Some games are particularly heavy with particular kinds of illegal actions. You can ask yourself, what do I feel like I'm missing? If you know or you expect that perhaps there are lots of forearm actions that are being missed, you need to adjust your position to try and see those things that you're missing. Which actions are having the most impact on the game? Now, so many illegal things happen in roller derby all the time. So you need to be able to triage which of the things that I think are happening or that I know are happening that are illegal are having the most impact on what's going on. And I want to adjust myself to optimally see those things. Does another referee have the same or better view of what I'm looking at? There's no point in focusing your attention on something that you know is happening if there's another official who's right there also looking at it. So you ask yourself, could I move somewhere or shift my focus to better take advantage of my perspective? Good feedback on OPR positioning should consider and evaluate patterns of successful and unsuccessful placement, not pick apart individual situations. And this is a failing that often comes from head referees as they try and communicate about OPR positioning. And I feel like people then who are receiving OPR positioning feedback kind of brush it off as useless or unclear, because often it is, because it's saying you missed that one call, or you need to be 5 feet closer to the pack in these kind of very fixed quantitative terms. And actually, the feedback that you should be getting and the feedback that you should be giving is what are the patterns of missing and catching particular actions that are happening on the track? Are you constantly giving or failing to give the particular support that this crew and this game need? And adjust your position accordingly.
All right. So this is me. We're going to talk about some OPR priorities. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's still complicated. So we're going to talk about what penalties are often seen in each position. But before we do, it's important to always keep the mindset that during games, we're not looking for penalties. We're observing gameplay, assessing penalties when an illegal action has been committed. So we're going to go over kind of the common penalties that you'll see, but keeping in mind that we're not looking for them. So what do I watch? First, we watch the jammers. I am a huge proponent that OPRs are not outside jam referees, but that doesn't mean we don't watch the jammers. When outside pack reffing, you're watching action, and as we all know, the action is typically around them. So you're really looking for legal entry into the back of the pack. The rear being slightly behind the pack, you have like some of the best views of that entry into a wall that often jammer refs may not have because they're because they're properly positioned next to their jammers instead of behind. You're watching for cutting on the outside. We don't have laser eyes yet. We can't see through people from the inside. And then as you kind of level up, you're helping watch for passes and points. Nothing is better than being a jam ref and looking up and as the jam ends and you're not sure if they passed those last people on the line before they went out of bounds or before the jam ended, and just getting that confirmation from an OPR that yes, they did or no, they didn't. After the jammers, we're going to watch the pack. And then through that, we've got a few like pre-jam duties, helping watch for false starts, too many skaters, not enough skaters, keeping an eye on the box. Often a head ref will keep an eye on the box, but as an OPR, just knowing, taking that time to know that the numbers are right. And kind of just eyeball communication with the inside on false starts. If they're next to you, you call it. If they're on the inside, they call it, but just like that confirmation that we've all seen it. Formation. OPRs don't do a lot of pack definition. That's not really our priority, but when packs start to bridge, we are a definite aid out there. Keeping on like that 20 feet in the back, long drawbacks, and bridging forward. And then we're watching blocking, we're watching roller derby, and we're watching for all the impact, the hits, everything. And then what do I watch? The officiating crew. Tim kind of mentioned it. As an OPR, you have to pay attention, have like that little nugget of where everybody is, more so than the inside crew has to. Where are the other two OPRs? Can you touch both your OPRs? You could probably change your position. Where are you in relation to the inside referees? If you are directly across looking at the identical thing, you can adjust back and see something different. As an OPR, you have a broader view, whereas sitting on the inside, you're a little more looking in OPR. You've got the ability, you've got 10 feet to move and see. So you've got that time to really like get that broader view, see where they are and adjust yourself without really distracting yourself from the game. And then where are we all in relation to the action? If the action is up here and you're kind of all three OPRs are towards the back, you're missing stuff in the front. So just kind of being really fluid, dynamic, being ready to adjust. And then I kind of already mentioned about, are we all looking at different actions? But basically, at the end of the day, when the question, what do I watch? Hold on, is the slide moving? Dahlia, can I get some clicks?
Yeah, the next slide says to open magnetic whiteboard.
Oh no, but I've got some clicks in here, some animation.
Oh, okay.
So what do I watch at the end of the day? One more click. Everything. The answer is everything, and it's not a satisfying answer, but it is the answer. And then, so we can talk a little bit about specifics. There are penalties that you'll look for. Being in the front, you'll often look for multiplayer blocks, forearms to the outside, kind of that chicken winging. For the middle, you are adjusting between typically a front group and a back group, and you're watching entries into the back and head blocks and swimming, and from the front, you're watching for multiplayer blocks and links. And then from the rear, you're watching that entry into the pack, multiplayer, forearms, run backs. Run backs as a rear OPR is so important. Because sometimes—
What do you mean by run backs? What is that?
Oh, run backs. Great question. We'll actually let's go into— I'm gonna share my screen.
Cool, go for it.
With the magnetic board. Let's see. I've never really done this. All right. Continue. Okay. Share. Cool. Do you see the magnet board?
Yep.
Excellent. So this is kind of your typical beginning. I didn't move the inside pack refs, but I do kind of move the jam refs, so you can kind of watch as everyone moves. So we start. We immediately are in two walls. We've got jammers around. I don't know if you saw, but the rear OPR just kind of like— I love to take a step back first and then go forward just to see what's happening. And then we keep going. We see the white jammers moving out. The black jammer's kind of stuck. Oh no, the black jammer got hit back. This is a large pack. We have run back. The black jammer got hit out of bounds in the previous slide. They go from here, they're out of bounds, they're being run back. So we've got our pack. I'm pointing to the screen. You can't see what I'm pointing at. We've got the pack. Is basically the two pivots are holding the pack while they have their teammates bridge back. So the pivot hit it out and then hit the black jammer out. The other three blockers go running back, bridging back, keeping a pack so that the jammer has to re-enter and then make the entire distance back. And that rear OPR is right next to the jammer. You basically skate next to each other. You're like, we're going. And then you have one of the best angles, especially on the corners, to see what's going on. And you can see that jammer ref in the middle got caught up and is a little bit in front. So they are not in an optimal position to judge the hips. And that happens more often than we like. Well, it's common, it's normal, it's skating. There's so many people in the middle. So moving back for those drawbacks. Does that make sense, Dahlia?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. And then we keep going. So we've got our front OPR up here. Oh, where am I? I don't know what's going on. There we go. Oh, hold on. I don't know. I'm going to stop sharing this. We're good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, we can go back.
Okay.
All right. Hold on.
Be good for me to take over?
Yeah, let's.
Okay. So this kind of complements a lot of what Chopsaw was saying around like specific communication. So there are specific communications you might want to chat around with your other OPRs. Sometimes that's around rotations. So as you've seen, people are often kind of moving back to wherever the pack is, but sometimes the pack might be going really, really, really fast, right? And at that point, the person at the back will often stop and turn around and go to the front. You should be communicating with your other OPRs about how and when to do that, because it's better to have two sets of eyes on something than no sets of eyes and everyone just like chasing on after. And so that kind of communication, and whether you're going to leapfrog another OPR. So what that means is that you might be trying to call a penalty, that skater doesn't hear you, and then you decide to follow that skater to wherever they go. And you should have communicated with your other OPRs if you're going to use that as a way to ensure a penalty has been called, rather than saying it louder, or rather than another official hearing and also then repeating that call. So this is all the type of communication that will build up over time and with experience that you should be having with your other OPRs. And you refine that over the course of games. And it's so satisfying at the end of a tournament when you're like, yeah, we've got this, because actually you've really synced in with the other OPRs. With jam refs, they will often come over to you and ask you where a jammer went left the track at the end of a jam, in order to understand whether it should be like how many points they should be getting. With inside pack refs, as Chopsaw said, OPRs very rarely deal with any of the kind of the pack definition stuff, but depending on the game, depending on the situation, it might be that you want to try and give a bit more either kind of shadowing or reflections. So you might also kind of, if you hear someone say out of like no pack, you might also do that. It's worth checking in with the IPRs if they want that and if they find that helpful. And it can also be that at points someone is so far forward, they're definitely out the engagement zone, and for some reason the IPRs are distracted. You can probably say out of play. But that's definitely something to check in with the IPRs about and to feel really confident about. The reason that IPRs are often responsible for that is to allow for consistency. And if people on the outside are also doing it, especially because of the way the track curves, there won't be that level of consistency, which then doesn't make it fair. Non-skating officials, all skating officials should be communicating with non-skating officials, making sure they've been able to collect the penalties that they're tracking, but also actually as an OPR, if someone is in the queue for the penalty box, it might be that you are closer to the NSO who might say, I'm going to hold up the whiteboard that says that, you know, red 212 is due in the box. As soon as I do that, can you let them know? And so there's that level of communication that you might have with the NSOs. And you do that by literally, the NSO in the penalty box will hold up the whiteboard with the number, and then you just say, you know, red 212, report to the penalty box. They will be aware that they're in the queue for the penalty box. So that's like another element of communication. And then also just for the skaters, so the queue for the penalty box, that kind of communication, full stop. So if they are touching or kind of straddling the jammer line, or touching the jammer line or the pivot line when they shouldn't be, and any questions. I am of the view, and when I head ref, I always say that skaters can ask any of the refs any questions. If they're too complicated, they might want to talk to the head ref, and we'll go over head ref stuff in a few weeks. But if a skater asks you a question, I think it is good practice to learn how to communicate with them in full sentences in a way that's supportive, clear, and not coaching. But I think it's something that is beginning to be more emphasized about kind of referee to skater player communication. And then also you've got the unofficial hand signals. So, you know, if there's been a star pass, this, I know that Tem has made me absorb it as well, to only do that if you know that the jam ref hasn't seen it, the NSOs haven't seen it, someone hasn't seen it, and that adds value. It can often look really chaotic if people are just kind of, you know, doing that. And then if someone's calling off, you know, doing that once again, if people haven't seen, can be really helpful, particularly if it's on the outside and a jam ref wouldn't be able to see it. So it's thinking about, when you're doing those kind of unofficial hand signals, are they adding value? Are you doing something that is communicating to the people who need to understand what is happening?
Can I add quickly to that as well? This is what Chop and I had both said about, like, looking to see where the other officials are before you ever signal this was a star pass or they're calling it off right now from the outside. My preference and my opinion is that you should always look up and check if the officials whose job it is to watch for those things can't see it from where they are distracted, are looking somewhere else. Maybe they have eye contact with their scorekeeper, maybe they're just not in position, but always take a moment to look up before you start to eagerly communicate something that official may already be on.
That, perfect. And now some lessons from Chopsaw about how to be a good OPR when you're the only skating official in your league.
All right, so I don't know if we've all seen this meme. We know these are IPRs. They're doing the pack definition, but they are lonely. They are by themselves in these pictures. So sometimes you're alone, and that's fine. The biggest, most important thing, can we go to the next slide? Is just being willing to advocate for yourself. Set yourself some training goals. You've probably got a friend in the league or someone who's been nice to you. Tell a skater, tell a coach, a captain, someone who can take your goals, help you be accountable for them, and also has kind of a bit of maybe a bit of authority, so to like ensure that those goals can be met. So do that, and then sorry, this was too small, I couldn't read it. Now I can. Clear communication, and most important is be compassionate with yourself when you are going in to like practice something new, something different, especially when there isn't outside support. You're gonna miss things. You can't see everything. It's literally impossible. The world will not end. Roller derby will not be over. Be compassionate with yourself and do not overextend. Go into a practice if you're like, I know that I am middle OPRing at this game in a week and I need to practice it, and no other refs show up, or you are literally the only ref in your league. Take that time, go to those coaches first thing. If you're comfortable, tell it to every skater, because that doesn't always get communicated. I love to do that with new people training, be like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I will be doing. I will do my best. And then I'm very fortunate. My league right now, they record every scrimmage. So we have footage within 24 hours. That doesn't happen many places. So if you know you're working on something, ask if you can just like set your camera up, record maybe 20 minutes, and then actually watch your footage. That's, I think, the hardest part about footage is sitting down and watching yourself, maybe not be correct all the time. And then click one more time. Boom. As Dahlia already mentioned, be open to like having communication with skaters. I think being willing to talk through what happened, why you called something, why you didn't, in a one-on-one way is one of the biggest steps to growing as an excellent official. And I say when appropriate, because we've all had that skater come at you very angry. That is not the appropriate time for that conversation. So then you can just say, hey, I would love to talk to you about this later. I'll keep this in mind. Let them cool down. I have a skater friend who we became friends because anytime there was a penalty that they didn't agree with, they were just like, hey, bookmark. And I was like, I got you. And then 20 minutes later, we would talk about it. This is good practice for when you've got other officials too, but it's also really, really important when you're the only one. And then if you can attend practice, go, whether or not there's a scrimmage. Before going to A Coruña, I went, oh, I'm jammer reffing. I've been lazy this season. I have to practice. I went to every single practice of the 2 leagues where I was, and they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, I'm just gonna either go work on myself, my footwork, my just being on wheels in the corner, or I will jam ref one jammer during your drills. And there were times where they'd forget and they'd be like, oh yeah, can you pack ref this? And I'll be like, nope, but I'm glad to follow this jammer. And everyone was okay with that because I was there for a reason, they're there for a reason, our reasons meshed, and that's great. When you're the only OPR, crossovers. Just crossovers are magic. Crossovers give you so much more speed going around such a longer distance. Work on that. As Tem said, OPRing is like the position where you can do nothing and the game won't break. But when you hustle and you do work, the game can get better, which is great. You see things, you stay up, and nothing feels better than like the team breaking into a sprint and you just sticking with them. And then the last note is kind of like, it's kind of a bummer note, but I think it's really important, whether you're the only one or you're in a group, be willing to leave. If you have advocated for yourself, they know what you're there for, and then people are still yelling at you about missing things, people are being disrespectful, being rude, don't throw a fit and walk off, but like go tell a coach, be like, I'm being treated inappropriately, and then leave. No, we don't need to be in that situation, and that situation can accelerate and get like worse, especially when you're alone and people feel like they can just pile on you. Yeah, walking out of a practice is sometimes like the most powerful thing you can do. Yeah.
Can I add to that one quickly as well? We had a question in the general sign-up document that we had, where people who were saying that there are lots of people who are refs and skaters, and that they go to practices where they would like to train to be a ref, but they're kind of pressured into training as a skater instead, or scrimmaging rather than. And I think it's a very similar point, that it's important for officials to be clear with their leagues, with the people that they're officiating. What do you need as an official? What do you need in order for you to train and for you to improve? And if you need to focus on specific things, or if you need to spend some time as an official rather than a skater, as leagues, leagues have a responsibility to be open to those needs. We said at the very beginning that officials are fundamentally here to be in service to the game and in service to the sport, and that's absolutely true. But officials cannot serve the sport if the sport doesn't allow them to train and grow and be better officials.
Agree 100%.
Yeah, I would also add that a lot of the time, I think sometimes unintentionally, players forget that officials exist. I think playing the sport can be so all-encompassing that it can be really hard to remember that actually officials, NSO, skating officials are there to also learn, and they have particular goals, and that being a player may not be their goal, right? Being an NSO, being a skating official might be their goal. And so creating that conversation, being open to answer questions and showing how like you're learning can really help their understanding. But also what we've started doing at London Roller Derby is making officiating compulsory in order to get be able to play, to be eligible to play. So we have skaters now reffing and NSOing at all of our scrims, which is easier for us, I know, because we have 4 teams, and so there are people around and we have that time. But actually what it's also meant is that I will work with them to have like a goal. What are you going to try and see today? And something that I often say is, if you can't come over and describe to me why you think it was a penalty, you probably shouldn't be calling it. If you can't describe what is going on, because then if a skater were to come over to you and ask you what is going on and you can't describe it, it may be that was not a penalty. And I think in a scrim situation, it's worth having conversations and chatting to people, even if it's a friend who doesn't really know much about the rules, just to start verbalizing and going, I think I saw this, even things you're not really sure about, because it really helps. I think also you begin to see things a bit more clearly, and making yourself more human to your league, when sometimes there can be real separation and sometimes really unhealthy relationships between officials and skaters. I think it's only positive, and they'll begin to really value you, because they'll understand that you being there and OPRing, and 2 people kind of doing the IPRing so that you can practice and get better, will help them in the long run. Sometimes that long run can be hard to see. So on that note, we're going to move a bit away from OPRing. If there are any questions, we will be taking them at the end. But now we're going to be talking about other illegal contact. Other illegal contact is 4.1.3 in the rulebook, and it says initiating a block is legal when a skater is moving it counterclockwise, in play, upright, and inbounds during a jam using legal contact zones. Other contact may be dangerous because it is unexpected. So that's both really specific and actually quite vague. That last sentence, when it's like unexpected contact, enables some level of discretion, but it also is an explanation as to why some of these things can make a block illegal. But what's important to understand as well is, what do we mean by impact? So impact is defined in a few different ways, but they all link in the rulebook. So gaining position on an opponent, or causing an opponent to lose position to another teammate due to an illegal contact, is always considered to have sufficient impact on the game. So a moment ago when I said, can you describe it, what's happening, if you can describe the action and the impact and go, well, actually, I believe that that was a forearm because they used their forearm, they knocked an opposing player over, blah, that's describing what the impact is. It goes on to say, if the contact puts an opponent significantly off balance or significantly alters their trajectory or speed, for example, significantly holding them back, also is impact. The thing that gets a bit more complicated when we talk about this kind of stuff is no impact. And what we mean by no impact is a violation of the rules of the game that has limited impact on safety or gameplay and does not warrant a penalty. So what that can mean is, if you're there and your forearm kind of, you know, it nudges someone, they don't move, you don't move, no one falls over, no one goes in or out of bounds, that isn't allowed. You are not allowed to use your forearm to nudge someone. However, there is no impact on the game. And obviously if it's not kind of repetitive and can be deemed kind of, you know, unsportsperson-like in some way, and I get all of these exceptions have extremes, then there's no impact. It doesn't mean the action was legal, but it also doesn't mean that it warrants a penalty. So we're going over that. Illegal contact has sufficient impact to warrant a penalty if a skater loses position or has their momentum or trajectory severely affected by a block initiated in an unexpected way. So what I'm talking about here is a penalty called direction. And I'm going to just kind of show you what I mean by that. So I don't have the numbers, unfortunately. So if you look at the kind of the row of the 3 white blockers here, the white blocker near the inside goes a bit further back. So they're going in an anti-Derby direction, because obviously Derby should be being played in a kind of in this direction. And then they hit someone out because they're trying to get to their jammer. Their jammer's really stuck at the back. The white jammer there is like, help me, I'm stuck. But by doing that, they have knocked out the black pivot. That is a direction penalty. Okay, that you would go like that. We'll do it more precisely when I stand up, because that was very bad arm positioning. But that's what I mean when I say direction. I mean going in the wrong direction to how Derby should be played and having an impact on the game. So now we have another scenario for you. And this links into directions. There's 2 kind of elements to direction. One is when you're really explicitly going in anti-Derby direction and you have an impact on someone. And the other is when you are stationary and impacting, and that is called a stop block, when you are on your toe stops, not moving your feet, and you are stationary. The thing I should add about directions that I forgot to mention, and it's actually part of the real basic element of it, and it's the thing that is so often confused, is a direction is based on the direction of the skater's feet, not their body. There is a skater at LRD called Errata. She is famous for being able to basically use her kind of shoulder, this area here, and like really, like, you know, and get you, you know, it's legal target zones, legal blocking zones, and it feels, from what I've been told, a lot like a direction. However, her feet are always going in the right direction. They aren't stopped, and they're going in Derby direction. So at that point, it feels to a player like it's been a direction, because the body was going in anti-Derby direction, but it isn't. So it's about where the feet are, not where the body is. And on that,
I have a minor clarification as well, just to pull some things together. So a stop block is a subset of the direction penalty, and that's because if you go back to the definition of things that are legal contact is legal when a skater is moving counterclockwise. So you can initiate a block when you're moving counterclockwise. That means if you're not moving counterclockwise because you're stopped or you're going clockwise, initiating a block is illegal. Both stop blocks and clockwise blocks are direction penalties.
Fact. Okay, so we've now got scenario 4.1.3. Blue pivot, in the case it's the white pivot if you're looking this up, stands still on their toe stops and initiates a block against red jammer. Red jammer does not fall, but is brought to a stop. Red jammer counterblocks, but blue pivot continues to block while on their toe stops, and red jammer is unable to get past. I'm hoping this visual will work. It's very technologically advanced. So as you can see here, you have the red jammer going in towards the blue jammer. The blue jammer goes on their toe stops. The red jammer is trying to get past, can't do it, and just gets stuck there. So based on that example, it's poll time. What do you think happens here? Okay, so 95% believe that blue pivot gets a penalty. 3% thinks no one gets a penalty, and 2%, which is a person, thinks that red jammer gets a penalty. So I don't know if you can see that. The result is that the blue pivot is penalized. The rationale is the red jammer loses position or has their momentum or trajectory severely affected by a block initiated in an unexpected way. The initiator should receive a penalty. In this example, if blue pivot had not maintained their stop block, but instead returned to counterclockwise skating, allowing red jammer to maintain part of their momentum, it would have not resulted in a penalty. And so once again, this comes down to that level of discretion. If something starts as a, with them stationary, but they actually start moving kind of nearly immediately, then don't call that. It's not really having the impact that you think it might be in that split second moment. But actually, if you see there's a stop and then they start moving and they start returning to counterclockwise skating, that would have been fine. So now we're on to, is this?
This is a direction of gameplay scenario.
Okay, I was like, why are the slides being funny today? So then this is another scenario. White blocker.
Can I do this one?
Cool.
This is me.
Okay.
Hello.
I've got a vote open in the magnetic board if you want.
Yeah, that would be good. I'll read it out. So this is a slightly more complex scenario. There's a few different elements, so consider it carefully. White blocker and black blocker are both skating clockwise at the same speed. Both skaters are jostling one another, mutually initiating multiple blocks in rapid succession. The contact from white blocker allows them to get around black blocker, giving them a clear path to recycle the black jammer. Were any penalties warranted at that point?
Sorry. Okay, so just to show that as an example, my hope is that this will work. Okay, so we've got this going on. So they're just going back and they're just going back. Okay, that's all that's happening right now. If you look at these two, the two at the back, all that's happening is they're both kind of nudging each other and going back. So the question
and significantly, they're nudging each other and going back. And which one is it in the scenario? There's something happens in the scenario that's important.
Not yet. It hasn't happened
yet. No, there is a thing that happens in the scenario, but I can't see the scenario.
The white blocker allows them to get around black blocker.
Yeah. So the contact from the black blocker, the contact from the white blocker pushes the black blocker out of the way enough that the white blocker can get past and head towards the black jammer.
Cool. So at that point, what do we think is happening? Do we think the white blocker and black blocker get a penalty? The white blocker gets a penalty? Black blocker gets a penalty? No one gets a penalty? Something else altogether? Please write it in the chat.
Dahlia, can you share the magnet board again?
Yep. Not right now whilst I'm doing the poll, but then yes.
Oh, correct.
Okay, so
there you go.
In this scenario, as white blocker pushes black blocker and is able to get past them, 53% of respondents think the white blocker should get a penalty. In fact, that is not the case. because the illegal action from the white blocker does not have significant impact on the game. And that's because a lot of people are probably caught out by the idea that because the white blocker has got past the black blocker, that's impact. However, if you remember from a previous session, relative position is only ever measured in the counterclockwise direction. So passing someone's hips like that while going clockwise is not sufficient impact to warrant a penalty. Now, if the black blocker had their trajectory or momentum significantly altered, if there were other things that would cause impact, there would be a penalty, but simply getting past them in the clockwise direction is not sufficient impact for a penalty. Okay, if we consider the same situation, but with after that happens, after the contact from the white blocker allows them to get around the black blocker, they're going towards the black jammer, a subsequent contact from the black blocker knocks the white blocker off balance, causing them to momentarily place their right skate down on the infield. Now, taking the scenario as a whole, the series of events, what happens now? White and black blocker both get penalties, black blocker gets a penalty, white blocker gets a penalty, no one gets a penalty, or some other option of your choice.
I'm going to launch the poll now because we've only got 5 minutes left.
Cool. So most people have said correctly that black blocker gets a penalty. So the clockwise contact, which is illegal from the black blocker, causes the white blocker to go out of bounds. Going from being in bounds to being out of bounds, as long as the jam is in progress, it's always sufficient impact from an illegal contact. A few people have said no one gets a penalty, and this is an understandable response because both skaters are doing illegal things, and there are sometimes situations where if illegal actions cause other illegal actions, then things shouldn't be penalized. However, this is a subsequent contact. It's not an action that is as a result of the illegal contact. It's considered independently. Both skaters are initiators, and the initiation from the black blocker has impact.
Okay, so at that point, we are moving on to multiplayers. Tem, Chop.
Yes, multiplayer blocks. So the rule for this, 4.1.4, skaters may not form a wall by linking with or grasping a teammate or otherwise forming an impenetrable connection. This action warrants a penalty if an opponent attempts to get between them and fails to do so due to the illegal formation. So when we're looking at multiplayer blocks, there are 3 things we need to be considered in order to assess whether the action has impact. So the first thing we need to consider, is there an illegal formation? So the illegal formations that are possible: grasping, which is defined very clearly as actively gripping with the hands; linking, which is the interlocking of arms via the crooking of an elbow, or it can also be the legs using the knee to crook; and any otherwise impenetrable connection. So anything that isn't specifically grasping or linking, but is considered impenetrable, which according to the glossary, can be considered impenetrable from a certain direction if, in order to achieve a pass on one or more of the skaters who comprise the wall, an opponent would need to physically break bones or joints. So this is about using kind of physics and leverage to create a situation in which skaters are locked together and cannot possibly be passed between. So we need an illegal formation. What we also need, it's not a penalty on its own just to grasp someone, just to form a link. We also need an attempt to get between the illegally connected opponents and a failure of this attempt due to the illegal formation. Now, what we see a lot is newer officials correctly identifying an illegal formation, excitedly witnessing that a jammer or another skater attempts to get between those illegally connected opponents, and then that skater is successful, they get through, their speed isn't affected, there hasn't been any failure. So the illegal formation has to stop something from happening. Just it being tested isn't enough. There needs to be trying to get through the illegal formation and failing to do so.
All right. So the scenario. So this is from the casebook. Red blockers form a 3-person wall. Side note, pretend there's a third person on the inside of the picture. So red blockers form a 3-person wall separating a white blocker from the other white blockers. The middle red blocker hooks their arms with the outside red blocker. White blocker initiates a block against the middle and outside red blockers, attempting to drive between the 2 skaters, but fails to make any progress. All blockers remain upright. What do we think it is? White blocker gets a penalty. Red blocker on the inside gets a penalty. Red blocker, the red pivot, the guy with the beard, gets a penalty. No one gets a penalty.
Just for time, I'm going to share the results early.
Perfect. So let's see, 79% of you think the red blocker on the right, on the inside of the track, gets the penalty. And 18% of you think the beardy pivot gets the penalty. And 3% think no one gets a penalty. The majority is correct. The red blocker on the right will get the penalty. Because we saw in the scenario, we saw that the red blocker did the hooking. They are the most responsible for the link, and they should receive the penalty. The rationale is the middle and outside red blockers gained an advantage by creating a link that white blocker cannot break. Once the white blocker challenged that link, their action became worthy of a penalty. Side note, had they immediately dropped the link and the blocker had gotten through, no penalty. Keep in mind, if it cannot be determined who initiated the link, then the skater closest to the referee calling the penalty should be penalized. So if an inside pack ref saw this, the red blocker on the inside. If an outside pack ref was calling it, the pivot would likely get the penalty. Keep in mind, if the middle red blocker had also been hooked to the inside red blocker, that invisible one that doesn't exist right now, no additional penalty would be warranted because that link was not challenged. And then just a really quick side note, if the same scenario, instead of the arms being linked at the elbow, they were shoulder to shoulder and the hands were grasping across the front, it would be the same outcome.
Yeah, I think if just to quickly go into kind of like the reason that when people are kind of waltzing, so kind of like, you know, they're a bit like that, and then there's a player coming kind of between those 2 shoulders, right? And they're grasping here. The reason that is a multiplayer is because it's due to the grasping that person is unable to get through. So when we think about what the definition is, you may not form a wall by linking or grasping a teammate when someone is trying to get between them. So that's why that kind of waltzing motion that people do when they're two hands holding together and they're trying to get through the shoulders can still be a multiplayer. Tem, before the Q&A, do you have anything you want to add?
I would like us to credit this wonderful graphic, please.
Yeah. So this credit is by Ethnic, also known as Nickname in Derby, and they have been incredibly helpful trying to create this and have said that they can do other drawings. And as people saw on the Facebook group, we're going to try and make it more visual. So thank you so much, Nickname, for doing this in such a short period of time. It's amazing, and I'm very excited about our future visualizations. On that note, we are about to do half an hour of Q&As, but if you do need to leave, you've got to get back to work. See you next week. This course is free, but if you did enjoy it, please feel free to donate to London Roller Derby to help support the league, or any of the food banks near where we train in Tottenham, Southwark or Brent. We really appreciate that. And just to make you aware that over the next few weeks, it's the end of the course, we will be doing some more kind of exercises and things like that. On that note, what we're going to do is what we usually do now, once the course is kind of the half an hour is ended, the hour is ended, which is tell you some penalties and Yes, I'm going to stop sharing and ask you to, if you're showing your video, to show us some things that you know. What is the signal for cut? Yeah, excellent.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Chopsaw, would you like to call out a penalty?
What is the penalty, the signal for a blocking with a head block? Yeah.
What is the signal to communicate an expulsion mid-jam? Go over your shoulder.
That's a trick question. We haven't gone over that, but a lot of you seem to get it right, which is amazing. Actually didn't say during the course, I feel like we really should have, is I'm going to test you first and then we'll explain it. What is the hand signal for multiplayer? Yeah, so it is this grasping. And the thing that some people do is they do it kind of in front of their chest, and most NSOs won't see that. So you want like a good high kind of like multiplayer. Yeah.
Make little hearts.
Drop.
What is the hand signal for a low block? Yes. Across the chest. Great.
How would you communicate a no pack?
So great. Okay, we are going to start answering some questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. And if you also want to speak them, just write you want to speak, and we will unmute you, and you can ask them verbally. So one question: as an OPR, do you whistle a jam off if you see the jammer, but the jam ref perhaps doesn't see it, or do they just show it to the other refs?
So I answered this one in the chat, and I'll do it again just so everyone can hear. As an OPR, you should only ever call off the jam if the jam needs to end due to an injury or for safety reasons, some bizarre extraneous circumstances, some illegal structural procedures where the game just cannot continue. Those are the only situations in which you'd call off the jam as an OPR. If a jammer is attempting to call off the jam and the jam referee hasn't seen it, you can communicate just by signaling, softly signaling. You should never blow the whistle, because the jam referee may have other information that allows them to know better whether or not it would be legal for that jammer to call off the jam at that point. Often jammers who are not the lead jammer or who have lost lead jammer status try to call off the jam. The jam referee rightfully does not call the jam at that point. If the OPR does it for them, this is a big mistake for everybody. A follow-up question for that in the chat was, what signal would they use? Most often we see this, small taps on the helmet. And the reason that they don't do the same call-off that the jammer is doing is that all of the referees use that signal when the jam is actually ended. So for any skaters who are deaf or hard of hearing, who maybe don't process the whistles, this signal from the referees means the jam has ended. So if they see an OPR doing that, the jam has ended as far as they're concerned. If the jam hasn't ended yet, they may give up their points and losing a significant advantage because of the signaling of the OPR.
That's something that we should actually probably clarify in the main bit of the section about, like, what do you do when that whistle goes? Because I realize we have yet to do that. Okay, so about warnings. When are they used? Is it always necessary? Are they only used with some penalties, or are they only used if the referee wants?
So this is the fun referee discretion. It's not always necessary. There are some things that a warning is necessary before a penalty can be given, such as in failure to return penalties if people are out of play. You cannot give that penalty unless you have given a warning. And then there are like the kind of more loose warnings, such as like potentials for false starts before the jam. instead of having to deal with that, you can just generally say, mind the line. Like, that kind of tells people you might be in the wrong place. They're not required. Referees have been given more and more kind of freedom in using their discretion to make sure that Derby gets to be played and kind of get rid of like the titchy technical penalties. If someone is lined up without a mouth guard, I mean, you can say, check your gear, check your mouth guard in a general way, because that's a safety, that's a technical penalty. And like, we have better things to do in this sport than, you know, get little like titchy stuff. So yes, they're only used if the referee wants, but really like safety, fairness is kind of, you know, my guiding factor for when and how I use warnings that aren't written into the rules.
Yeah, and they're encouraging it more and more, and so it's really important to think about like how do you do it in like a coaching way. And I think at the moment, like the mouth guard thing, there's a current discussion on like one of the rules. If it's a safety thing, I would definitely give a check your mouth guard, and then if after the whistle goes they still don't have a mouth guard in, I would potentially ask to see their mouth guard. It might be they have one here and one in their mouth. But then it would be a penalty. But it wouldn't be a penalty until the jam starts, because until then they haven't done anything, and in a way that's, you know, with contact that would make it, you know, deeply unsafe.
It's also not just about safety. I mean, the legality of it is about safety, but it's very explicit in the rules that the officials and the skaters and everybody involved, all the participants in the game of roller derby, need to be working together to prevent illegal actions from happening. And so actually, if as a referee, you have information that a skater doesn't have because they haven't noticed that they don't have their mouth guard, waiting for the jam to start so that you can catch them out and give them a penalty is kind of weird and narcissistic, and doesn't actually kind of support the flow of the game, because that person doesn't get to play roller derby. And actually they could have fixed it so quickly if you just said, oh, your mouth guard's in your helmet, and they go, okay, you know, or less specifically, you are not wearing a mouth guard. Yeah, we're not trying to catch anybody out. It's the same reason that like seeding cuts is now a thing. We're not waiting to trigger penalties. We're trying to prevent them.
Yeah, and things like full starts, similarly, they have minimal impact. So you give a warning, which means you don't blow your whistle. If they then ignore you and they've actually continued to gain that benefit of their full start, all that kind of, then you get, then it would be a penalty. But there isn't a penalty immediately with the warning, which is why you don't blow your whistle, because a whistle signifies a penalty, unless it's two short whistles in signifying the jammer. But it can be confusing when you're like, did I get a jammer? Did I get a penalty? You'll find out soon. Okay. In terms of the first scenario, red jammer on blue pivot, this is the one with the stop block. If they walk backwards, derby direction, on toe stops, is that okay? What if the blue pivot gets pushed back whilst they're still on their toe stops? In my view, if they are moving, even on toe stops, although I would be worried for the safety of their ankles, they're still moving, they aren't stopped. And at that point, I would say that it's fine. They are also still blockable because they are on the track and moving to all extents and purposes. It could be dangerous if they're on their toe stops. And actually, if we saw that happening regularly, it might be that the refs would have a question about why someone is walking more than skating, but I've never seen that or thought that I might. There's a linked question before I let Tem and Chopsaw add, which is, what penalty would they get for that? No, that's not true. It would be a stop, and it's a stop block. And then we'll go into the other scenario, which also asks about which penalty. But the stop block is kind of a movement like that.
But I mean, the point is, it wouldn't be a stop block because they are moving clockwise at the time.
Yeah, sorry. In the actual, the way that they weren't moving, if they were not moving in that scenario, the penalty they would get would be a stop block.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
If they started to move immediately, it would not be a penalty, even if they were still on their toe stops.
Yeah. So for direction, unless the impact is down, out of bounds, like an actual loss of position, both for clockwise and stop block, it's about it being sustained. That's when it can rise to the impact spectrum.
Another question we've had about the scenarios that we've done today is in the one around the direction. in which the blocker is pushed back until the white blocker is fully out of bounds, the red blocker would be penalised. We had a question about scenario C, 4.1, point 3, point B, and red blocker is penalised. And I believe...
So C 4.1.3b is not one that we covered in the session. It's one that's about an illegal contact penalty for blocking out of bounds. So it's contact where one blocker is initiating contact on another blocker. That contact moves them into a straddling position. They continue to block until they're fully out of bounds. But then after the blocker is fully out of bounds, the inbounds blocker initiates a new block on that blocker. And that is illegal. So the skater who's completely out of bounds has no expectation of being hit when they're fully out of bounds. While straddling, they can be hit, but once they're fully out of bounds, initiating a completely new contact is a skating out of bounds illegal contact. So yeah, the penalty that would be issued, illegal contact, and if you wanted to add the supplementary information, out of bounds block.
Cool. Is there any good unofficial signal if an OPR sees an OPAC form to let the IPR know if the IPR doesn't see it?
There's no unofficial signal. I mean, hopefully you've had kind of a chat with your IPR earlier, as we talked about PAC definition responsibilities. If you know they don't see it and it is clearly a no PAC, this usually most commonly will only happen if you're the middle PAC ref and like something weird happened. Call it, but be big, be loud, be very definitive, and get there. Like, you have to know that they didn't see it. You have to know that they're looking at something else, and you have to get their attention so that they can be like, you're right, and then get right back to defining the PAC. Like, there's no good way besides just making the call.
Yeah, and if it's a more fringe situation where you're like, oh, I think this is a split PAC, but I'm not sure and I don't really have time, and oh, now there's a PAC again. And if it's not your primary responsibility, don't bother trying to signal something. Don't bother like calling a no PAC in case you're wrong, if you don't have time to verify, you don't have time to check whether the IPRs are on it. Like, after that jam ends, skate into your IPR, skate into your rear IPR, your head referee, and just say, I think there was a split PAC at this point in the jam there. Did you notice that? And maybe they'll be like, no, I'll be more on that next time. It's more the kind of feedback that you can give in between jams and something you should be looking for a signal for during a jam in progress. If it's significant enough, call the no PAC. If you aren't able to call the no PAC, you don't need to communicate anything at that time.
So this is going to be the last one that's really intentionally around, and then we're going to go on to other things, although we've moved around a bit already. Can you give an example of a full start warning that could be called by a rear OPR? I would say orange, 1, 2, 3, full start.
Like a situation in which a rear OPR might issue a full start warning would be a blocker on the outside line, partly touching out of position. So if a blocker is on the jammer line, for example, touching the jammer line, as well as being inbounds and in their normal position, it's a false start. So things that the jam referees aren't seeing, things that the inside PAC referees aren't seeing, it would usually just be the skaters, typically the blockers, because usually the jam referees are looking very intently at their jammers. Typically, false starts from OPRs are on the blockers who are closest to them. So you would get false start warnings usually from the front OPR or the rear OPR when people are touching slightly outside of the engagement zone.
I would also
now, with our ability to give warnings, mind the line, we won't have to call those anymore in an ideal world.
Yeah, and I'd also say if you're working on a sports court where there are 12 different colors and people are like repetitively on the wrong line, I have definitely had situations where I'm like, the blue dotted line is, you know, is the jammer line, and like give them that information until you feel like they're confident that they know it. The thing about that kind of communication is give it if you would give it to anyone, and if you know that it's like fact, it's there. And you know, we're encouraged now to say things like skaters watch your wheels, to encourage just, you know, a jam to happen without kind of penalties and things like that. We've talked about out of play indications being called by left or right hand, depending if you're at the front or the back of the. My question is, does it matter whether a penalty, like a low block or illegal contact, is indicated left or right-handed, i.e. low block, left arm across the chest, or right arm? The answer is no. To my understanding, the rulebook does not have any specific...
The codes, cues and signals document says always uses neutral language in terms of direction, and says, you know, use the opposite arm or put your arm across the chest and use this. So the signals are internally consistent based on however you started them. You can begin in any direction.
And I think that neutrality is actually really important. I briefly officiated with an official who only had one arm. And so if we had said, you have to use your left arm, which she did not have, it would just make it so she would not be allowed to ref. So like we, you know, were able to take that language and, you know, zhuzh it. So like her low block or her cut was far away from her body. Her low block was close to her body. And that kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any other questions. Does anyone have any final questions? Does anyone want to ask questions verbally? Otherwise, that is it for this week's session. Oh, someone has a question. Would you like to say it?
It's Alex with the epic microphone.
Oh,
Speak.
I hope you have the epic microphone.
I do have the epic microphone. Thanks. I just had one question or clarification on direction that I wanted to ask. And that is, say we've got a white jammer comes up to a black blocker who's fully stopped, and the white jammer has initiated this block on the black blocker who is fully stopped. They're not able to get through, and essentially at this point the black blocker is initiating a counter block. I believe so. If the black jammer remains stationary, they would get a stop block. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's legal for a block to be initiated on someone who is stopped or skating clockwise. So it's legal, perfectly legal for the jammer to initiate contact on that stopped opponent, and then by maintaining their stop position and preventing further momentum from that jammer, if you consider that they're counter blocking or maintaining that stop position and affecting the jammer's momentum and trajectory, then absolutely a stop block penalty should be assessed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question. What is a no pass, no penalty? I think this is something more jammers might call question mark.
Tem, do you want it, or I can take it?
I feel like I'm hogging the spotlight, so on you go.
No pass, no penalty. That's some old terminology, which I still use and I'm trying to break of. We now call it a no earned pass. And it's more often used in relation to a jammer. And basically, it's a way to say entry was legal, though they did not earn a point or a pass. So white jammer gets hit out by black blocker also touches out of bounds, white jammer comes in front. They did not earn a pass or a point in terms of either lead jammer or scoring, but they also didn't earn a penalty because the blocker was no longer eligible to get that cut. It's signaled like this. It is not signaled like this because this gets confusing and then you think it might be a cut. So it's a very like calm, deliberate, like boom, boom. They went around. It was legal, but they didn't get any benefit from it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the reason that we don't say, or that the language has been adjusted from this no pass, no penalty idea to no earned pass is that this covers more than just situations in which, so no pass, no penalty kind of implies or used to kind of cover illegal actions that meant that a point wasn't scored but didn't have enough impact to warrant a penalty, or actions that have a questionable legality. But actually, no earned pass situations are more extensive than situations involving illegal contact or illegally gaining position or any of these kind of things, because the jammer skating without a helmet cover and passing opposing blockers, there's nothing illegal about a jammer not wearing their helmet cover, but they can't earn a pass in that situation. So it's a no earned pass rather than a no pass, no penalty, just to account for the fact that we're not always concerned with the legality of the situation.
Someone has asked a question of, isn't this super important if the jammer is trying to get lead jammer status?
Yes.
Yes.
I could see Chopsaw like nodding, and I was like, you need to say words, otherwise it's just looking like.
Yes. And it's actually, it is kind of interesting because I think benches seeing a no earned pass and then a jammer getting lead can often be very confusing, but that indication means they did not earn that pass at that moment. We all know, or we are learning, that jammers can repass people or have already passed someone. Once you pass them legally, you don't lose it. So just know if you do that and they get lead anyway, you might have a coach coming and be ready to just be like, yep, they passed them some other time legally.
Yeah,
I think that's something else to add, which is the no earned pass tells you about a piece of information at a specific moment. And it might be that someone does this and then they get a cut. And it can often be that the officials are like, but what happened? It was that. And one official might be talking about a specific skater. And the other official might be like, well, I am calling a cut on something else. And so it's important to communicate, because you can always rescind, you can take away a penalty if you need to. But it, as Chopsaw said, it tells you about a piece of information at a particular moment. And it doesn't mean that at another moment, something else happened that can make it confusing, but still true, that a penalty should be awarded, that lead status could still happen. And it can get confusing, but it's important to continue to communicate, both with the other officials, with the bench staff, and sometimes even the skaters who are like, what happened here? Tam, do you have anything to add?
Nope.
Cool. We are once again at a point with no questions. And so on that note, I am going to end the session here. Thank you all so much for coming at such short notice.
Can I say one thing?
For all the Canadians, I hope you have a wonderful
Chop.
bank
Can I
holiday.
say one thing really fast?
Chop has some words. Chop has some
For
words.
everyone, I love OPRing. It's my favorite. I've been doing it for ever, 13 years. And if you have questions, I am unemployed right now. I am alone in the mountains. You can email me, chopsawderby@gmail.com. I'll put it in the group. I love talking about OPRing. And if you really want to get into some weird, like, put this and that and footage, email me. I'm 100% down. But sorry, continue, Dahlia. That's all.
No, I was going to say thank you very much, Chopsaw, for joining us. We'll see. We have some ideas about how to do some like maybe smaller breakouts away from these main sessions about a few things, such as like kind of pack definition and maybe even OPRing, if Chopsaw will help, to try and like give some smaller spaces for people to chat about things. But on that note, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and see you on Sunday.
Bye.